What's up, everyone? We are here to talk full spoilers for Spider-Man Homecoming, his first big MCU movie after popping up in Civil War. So again, full spoilers ahead. Jim, Terry, Tom, let's start with you guys, since I am the standing reviewer of the movie. What did you guys think of Spider-Man Homecoming? I loved it. Terry?
I thought it was a delight. I thought it was so much fun. I went in hoping that I was going to love it, and I walked out loving it. And yeah, I just thought it was a great, great film, and maybe the best Spider-Man film. We can talk about that in a bit.
Definitely. Tom?
I would agree with Terry in thinking that it's probably the best Spider-Man film, and I know the Spider-Man 2 fans out there are probably kind of losing their minds a little bit at that, but I think it does a lot with the Spider-Man world and that character that we haven't seen before, and it nails it. So I loved it.
Well, I agree with both of you. I love the movie. I still think, maybe it's just a sentimental thing, I still think Spider-Man 2 gets the edge, in my opinion, because I loved Doc Ock and what they did in that. But I will say, Spider-Man Homecoming captured everything that made me remember things that I loved about Spider-Man that I think I had forgotten. And I read the comics all the time as a kid. I'd draw my own Spider-Man comics, everything. I loved it. And I feel like this movie really captures what makes Peter Parker matter, and that's so much a big part of the story is, Peter has to matter as much as the suit, more than the suit.
They have that line in the movie.
They do. It's almost as if I'm just parroting dialogue. So I think a big reason why this Peter Parker and Spider-Man works is the guy playing him, young Tom Holland. I said in my review, I think he is the definitive big screen Spider-Man. What say you, Terry and Tom?
Well, I am going to steal that from you because I read your review and I really liked it. And I fully agree. I think you walk out of this movie and he just captures the fun, the energy, the physicality, like exactly the personality that the Peter Parker people came to know and love has, and he just pops off the screen. And you said in your review as well, he holds his own against amazing charismatic people like Michael Keaton and Robert Downey Jr. and just still holds the camera on him. And I think that I can't wait to see what his next adventure is. We know that he'll be in Infinity War. We know that there's going to be Homecoming 2 kicking off Phase 4, and this is a Spider-Man who I just can't wait to continue going on adventures with.
Yeah, and a lot is going to be made of how dynamic he is and how his comedic timing is perfect. He is hilarious, but I think that he really shines in the movie's quiet moments, especially when Vulture has kind of collapsed the roof of his sort of lair on top of him.
Yep.
It hurt.
It really hurts. And he plays that like a 15-year-old kid who is being crushed to death and wants somebody to help him.
Yeah.
And he plays that just as realistically as the moments when he is swinging around stopping ATM robbers using Chitauri technology, and you believe him throughout. And that is something that not everybody can do.
Yeah.
And I'll say he helps ground something that works across the entire movie, which is this is a cast of not sophomore high school aged actors playing the most believable high school students I've seen in a film in so long. But you need that, right? They can't feel like they're 20-somethings playing 15-year-olds. They feel like they've captured that excitement and drama and frustration that you feel when you're that age, and I think he does that especially well. You see Peter wanting to be an adult, and I know I at least can relate to that. When I was 15, I was like, get me out of here, get me in college, let me do the job that I'm doing now already. I'm ready for it. And it so works within this movie as a standalone, but also as coming off of Civil War and seeing the amazing things that Peter Parker can do. And I love that we got a movie to really watch him grow and form into the Spider-Man who, we've come to see in the more adult depictions of the character. Right. I think it's so necessary for a story. And I think that goes back to you talking about, seeing some of the things you forgot that you loved about him in the past, because he has those growing pains. He's not perfect.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I loved about Tom Holland's performance as Spider-Man, and just sort of the way the MCU has chosen to depict this character, is that they capture that he is a kid. He's a good kid. And, his biggest quandary, Spider-Man's biggest thing is always about responsibility. With great power comes great responsibility, but there's also responsibility to be Peter Parker, the student, who his classmates are depending on him. His Aunt May worries about him. He has a responsibility to himself, and it's not just about being an Avenger and having powers and all that sort of thing. And I thought that the movie did a great job of, not like, it delivers the moral of its story in a way that's still fun. And it never really kind of, it just hit all those right notes. And I love that you mentioned it.
He's never infallible either.
Yeah,
he's never infallible.
He screws up all the time. Yeah.
And there's that scene in at the circling around Liz's party where he is planning on going into the party as Spider-Man just to get Liz to like him, and then he ends up having to go track down
Flash.
Vulture. Yeah,
Stupid
exactly.
Flash.
Flash. Oh, peanut. the DJ horns. I was loving those.
But you see, Tom Holland helps you accept why Tony Stark would like this kid so much, would invest in this kid, would bring him on. I think that was the biggest challenge in maybe casting the MCU Spider-Man is you have to believe that this kid can hold his own with the rest of them and bring something new to the table and be a force that you would want to follow in future movies, basically the new face, of the MCU. So I think he's just fantastic across the board. And he's also, I love that you brought up the moment of him being, because that was so human, and he's scared. He is a scared kid. And I think that he's also happy being Spider-Man. Like, despite the tragedy that kind of informed why he became Spider-Man, he sees the good side in it. He's not moping around. And this isn't a knock on the past Spider-Man movies, but I think they leaned into the melodramatic, sort of iconic moments from past Spider-Man stuff almost too much. Mm-hmm. And this is just like, this is the Peter Parker who is week to week, issue to issue, swinging around New York, saving the day, helping out the neighborhood people, maybe screwing up. Like, I love the thing with the guy.
Trying to save the bodega, saving the bodega cat.
That was so nice,
Murphy.
Yeah, that's how you know it's a New York
then
movie.
the guy who's like just trying to get into his car and he like webs him and he's like, you idiot,
Yeah, and this is the first time, and we get like maybe one scene in every movie, but this is the first time we see him for an extended period of time being the friendly neighborhood Spider-Man.
And I love that that's the lesson he learns at the end of the movie too, right? Like, I very much expected he would come out of this an Avenger, and instead he makes the choice like, no, maybe the neighborhood does need a Spider-Man, and maybe that's the level that I'm at right now. And I love the whole, oh, that was a test, right? Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
I think it's so necessary to see him take that lesson away, because we know, again, he will join the Avengers farther down the road, not too far down the road, on summer vacation responsibly. I love that takeaway.
You guys, great transition as longtime viewers and listeners know. I love the segues. So I think one of the things that really works best about Spider-Man Homecoming is that it is a smaller stakes story, street level, less concerned with world building. There's not any of that, the sort of the machinery at work in a Marvel movie that can sometimes dehumanize it a little bit. This is all about, I love that it was basically just, friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. I don't think you ever really see, outside of Avengers Tower, like a character involved with a building that's maybe bigger than like 6 stories or something like that. I think the highest building we actually see Spidey on is when he's sitting on like the terrace.
The Washington Monument, too.
Oh, the Washington Monument.
Yeah. No,
So,
but to go off that, the smaller stakes, I think this does something better even than the Netflix street level movies, where they're still like, the villains there are going to destroy the city, right? There are big stakes, even if they aren't like world destroying stakes. And here, the stakes are very personal, are very small, and so important to building the character of Peter. And I said this on Twitter, like, it's small stakes in all the right ways. In the ways that we saw in Ant-Man, but that frequently the Marvel Cinematic Universe isn't interested in exploring those stories.
Because it ties in too with the comics. I mean, the comics, there are plenty of issues where Peter is just, I gotta get rent money and stuff like that. Like, those are the relatable things, and Spider-Man is arguably perhaps the most relatable superhero. For children, for working class people, like, he's the hero you just feel like, not that you could be, but that maybe you would want to be. Like, he reflects you. And, I think this movie and the way that they told this story, where making it to your academic decathlon meet is as important as all your sleuthing into the Vulture, and the fact that you're investigating Vulture screws up the other thing. you know? And so I really felt like they did a great job of just making sure they hit all those marks. On the smaller scale stuff, I think a big part of what makes that work as well is the villain, is Vulture.
Yes.
What did you guys think of Michael Keaton's Vulture?
I thought that he is going to go up with some of the MCU's best villains, and he's not, again, you say, this is not world-ending stakes. This is a guy who, ad nauseum, tells us that he is doing all this to protect his family, to keep his family's livelihood, going. And there is actually something really interesting about this kind of arc that he has, which is that he constantly is just beating Tony up for being this fat cat in a high tower, and the little guys are, suffering because this guy's boot is coming down on us. But you look at his house when it's revealed that Adrian Toomes is Liz's dad, which is like that, and that scene was amazing.
Yeah.
That scene was so good.
That whole sequence.
Keaton, Holland played it perfectly.
It shows why you
so
needed
tense.
Keaton too.
Yes,
because he can
exactly.
play the dad as well.
Yeah, exactly. And who was even thinking of that?
Yeah. Kevin Feige.
Yeah, Kevin Feige had it in mind. But the thing that I actually didn't like when I first walked out of the theater, but in retrospect, I think it's actually kind of genius, is the fact that, Adrian Toomes lives in this amazing, beautiful, nice house. 3 words to describe the house. I do like that. And he's kind of become what he railed against.
Yeah.
And that makes him so much more of an interesting villain than I think a lot of these galaxy-ending villains that we've seen before kind of represent.
Yeah.
I think he's much more of a Yondu than,
Yeah.
I don't know. And I'm like even blanking on Lee
Well, I
Pace's
think
character from
he
Guardians. He's so
he is such a
forgettable.
great kind of counterpart for Peter and I think this is how he's able to connect with Peter and try, like in the scene where he's just trying to buy time to bring down the building.
Yeah.
He's not telling Peter anything that's untrue.
Mm-hmm.
You do, and in a way, in the end, Peter's choice to not join Stark and be the neighborhood, as Downey puts it, the Springsteen-esque kind of working class hero thing. I mean, that is kind of reflecting back some of Vulture's own language, and there is something relatable there. And I think also too for Vulture not revealing, he figures out Peter Parker's Spider-Man real quick in one of the movie's best sequences.
Yes.
But I think it says a lot about that sort of tribalism, frankly, of when you come from blue-collar areas, you kind of close ranks around your own. And I think he sees something in Peter that it also too. I mean, Peter saves his life. He saved his daughter's life. He did threaten to kill him and everyone he loves if he threatened his family, his basically way of life. But ultimately, I think there's something, I don't want to say affection, that's probably too strong a word, but there's an
mutual
acknowledgement.
respect almost.
There's an acknowledgement that this kid matters and that we're all kind of on the same page.
And you see that at the end of the movie too. I mean, we've talked about how relatable both Peter Parker and Vulture are, and I think Vulture just feels so human.
Yeah.
His motivations are so understandable, even if I wouldn't go that way to try and make ends meet and find my place in the world in the way that sort of he goes around damage control. I think we get where he's coming from, and then we see his family, we know his family, and that, as you said,
Shocker
that scene
has a great line that speaks to that when he says,
Which one?
These a-holes make this mess and then they get paid by the taxpayer to go and clean it up.
Yeah.
Right.
They're getting screwed in every level. Not only is your city coming down around you because of these people, now they're going to get rich off of it. It really does
You
capture
totally, you can relate to it. Now I'm sure a lot of people in our current, country could relate to that. But the scene that I love, going back to what you're talking about, the mutual respect, is when Peter does go and save Vulture at the end. He tries to talk. He's like, no, it's going to explode. He goes, he rescues him out. And it's not a close-up. It's more of a wide shot. But there is this look that Keaton has on his face when he's looking up at Peter where he's like, I get you now.
He's done fighting. He could have probably kept struggling, but he kind of just
He's like, yep, okay, I get that you're the hero and I'm the villain, but I understand you now. You aren't just this kid who I can intimidate. You're trying to do what's right.
Pedro.
Yeah, no matter who it is. And I think that is really respectable, and we see that again in the first post-credit scene
the
where
scorpion scene.
and he makes the choice to not give up Peter's identity. And I love that there was that moment. It again really helps humanize this character.
It's also too, it speaks to the fact that Adrian Toomes, yes, he's been behaving as a criminal, but technically he's not been a criminal until he ends up in prison. He was just a guy, a scrapyard guy. So he's been able.
Stealing.
No, he's stealing. I'm saying he's been behaving as a criminal, but he's not somebody. He doesn't know what it's like in prison. He's never been arrested until that, as far as we know. There was no record on even Herman Schultz, the Shocker. The only record they could find was on Scorpion. I thought it was kind of interesting that these are regular guys who kind of cross that line. The same way that we've used to seeing in superhero stories, particularly the MCU, the regular people who cross the line to become a superhero, a vigilante. It's just a different kind of vigilanteism in a way. They just want to make money at it.
Yeah, we hear from a lot of actors, from Mads Mikkelsen to Corey Stoll, that to make their, MCU villain, they need to be the hero of their own story. But we don't frequently see that reflected on the screen. We get such a small portion of it. And I think that in this movie, they did a really good job of balancing, seeing a lot of their story, even spending the whole Marvel logo opening sequences focusing on Vulture and his sort of origin story.
Yeah.
And I think that's part of what worked. We know MCU has a villain problem. Even the villains who we think we're going to love the most, we don't.
Yeah.
To me, like you said, Adrian Toomes is up there with maybe top 3. We don't have a lot of good choices to choose from.
And it's not like he's in the movie a lot. They open with him, he kind of goes away for a while, he comes back in spurts here and there, and then of course he's in the home
it the
stretch.
right amount.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Actually, and it's also, it too speaks to the sort of two dad figures really in a way between Tony and this guy. There's the guy Peter wants to be, which is Tony, but maybe in a way Adrian is more the guy that Peter can be or can relate to, As awesome as Tony is, as all the stuff that he has, Tony's responsible for Tony, and Tony has been trying to become the better guy of I worry about you and your death would be on my conscience. But as Vulture and I think Shocker kind of point out, how do you think? Oh no, Vulture points out in the scene with Peter in the garage, where he's like, how do you think he made his money? He made his money doing what I'm doing, selling weapons to bad guys.
I do want to talk about Tony a little bit, because I expected, when we heard that this was going to be, an Iron Man and Spider-Man buddy movie, I expected Tony to be in the movie a lot more than he ended up being, and I'm so glad.
He has more screen time, I think, in the NBA TV spots in a way, which aren't even in the movie.
And this is not a knock. I love Iron Man, but it would have been so easy for this to be an Iron Man movie, and I'm so happy that they really minimized how much screen time he actually had and made those scenes count, because they easily could have really distracted from the point. And I didn't I love the happy stuff was funny. It didn't always work for me. I thought they ended up maybe overusing him a little bit in some of those sequences, and Happy's not an idiot.
You do kind of understand, or you kind of question all right, look, you're there to be his conduit. Why are you just yeah-ing him? Maybe the kid's onto something. You should listen.
And then Happy totally screws up at the end, and it's Peter who saves the day. But I think that it was really interesting, both in sort of the vlogging opening that they have, that we get to see the world through Peter's eyes and also see Tony through his eyes. And as we transition into this late phase 3 part of the MCU, we're close to phase 4. I think being able to see Tony as a mentor and as a teacher is a really important part of his
because
transition.
We've seen him, and the reason why he's such a compelling mentor is because we have seen him learn the lessons that he's trying to impart onto Peter.
Yeah.
So we know that Tony's heart and head is in the right place. Exactly. Yeah, and he delivered his best line in the movie, I think, is when he's about to take back the suit and Peter's complaining about wanting to be as great as him, and he said, "I want you to do better."
Yeah.
That. We have context for that, and that's what makes him such an interesting teacher.
It's part of what makes me happy that we're getting Spider-Man at this point in the MCU, right? It's crazy that it's been a decade that we've been watching these movies on this
happy
journey.
accident in the way that it kind of worked out. The
and
timing couldn't have been better.
It really did work out, and you have this history with these characters, and you hear Tony saying, "Oh, well, I want to be the lessons I learned from my father. I want to be better from my father," and we know that relationship well. well. We've had movies to explore that relationship. We've seen Agent Carter that we've gotten to see that relationship. So yeah, it just really, really did work for me. And Jim, you had like some questions a little bit about, hey, this is right after the events of Civil War. Why is he being so chipper? And sort of the nods at the end that we can get into, because I disagree with you on some of them.
I was just pointing out that, look, this is kind of an issue I have with some of the Marvel movies, where it seems like the big thing that happened in the last movie doesn't seem to matter as much when you come to the next movie. Like, we're going to burn down all of S.H.I.E.L.D. and Nick Fury's going on the run, and then Ultron comes along and is like, I show up in the end with a helicarrier, and, so...
They explain that on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., for the record. They explain it on Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. Watch all the MCU.
All you 20 people have seen it. I'm kidding. I'm
jerk.
kidding you. What I will say is that, I thought it was just a little... It was just a little weird, given how grand the stakes were in something like Civil War, when it's Cap versus Iron Man, and that he seems to be speaking fairly well of Cap throughout most of the movie, and that the Berlin scene is literally just hours after he just basically broke up with his bro, Cap, and found out what really happened to his parents, and he's just being sort of back to his glib self. And I understand he's there and he's gonna, put on a face for the kid, but...
Wouldn't he have sent back... he would have sent back Peter after Cap escapes, so before the end of Civil War. So it's probably before that big breakup and he finds out what happened to his family.
But that was only hours later. It wasn't like
wouldn't
weeks
he
and weeks had gone by.
Yeah, but wouldn't he just take Peter back to the airport after they
so
finished?
it must have happened then between
the second act and the third act.
When in Civil War, when Tony shows up at the prison and then goes off to the ice caps or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Thinking about it now, I bet because they're at the airport anyway. Wouldn't he?
But he
just
still just kind of broke up with his buddy.
Yeah.
But, all right, whatever. We'll table that. That's just a little observation.
But the other thing you wanted to talk about was at the end, there are a couple Easter eggs where they're talking about they're packing up the new suit, they're packing up Cap's new shield,
yeah,
and they're
prototype
packing
for
up
a new shield.
Yeah, and they're packing up Thor's magic belt.
Thor's magic belt.
Yeah. And
so it's like, why are you making a prototype new shield if you guys are on the outs? And Cap is even jokingly referred to by Coach Wilson, Hannibal Buress's character. All that stuff. And I do want to talk about the school stuff in a minute, because that's one of the most charming things.
So I have two thoughts on the shield thing. First of all, maybe it's an Easter egg teasing that maybe there's something that's been going on behind the scenes in these 8 months since the end of Civil War that we don't know about yet, but we'll find out about in a movie like Black Panther, maybe. So that's my one thought. The other thought is, well, he's Tony Stark. Of course he's going to keep tweaking Cap's shield. Like, I think that we've seen
it did need to be repaired. It was damaged.
It needed to be repaired. They want to enhance it, and I think that he knows that even though they broke up, like, they're still heroes fighting for the same cause in different ways. So I don't know. That to me, I'm not like, oh, why would he be doing that?
But it's like getting back your engagement ring and then having it spruced up and giving it to your new one. Oh, speaking of which, Pepper Boy, like your new fiance.
I think he's just doing it, waiting for Cap to return.
Yeah, and you know what? There is sort of this, at the ending of Civil War, with that cell phone coming in, the burner from Captain America, like there is this sort of this tenuous olive branch that's sort of hanging there for Tony to take. So yeah, it does make sense to me.
He just texts him a photo of his new shield, like, well, come pick it up.
Yeah, we've all been there in breakups, hoping that, this is something
you
we can get past.
You left this in my apartment if
back.
you just want to come by and get it.
Yeah.
Maybe I'll be here, maybe let's talk about a couple other things since we're talking about the end of the movie. That new Spider-Man suit that he designs that he doesn't take with him. He gets his old new suit back at the end. But that was a really interesting sort of design. Just not quite a one-to-one parallel with any of the comic book or TV show iterations. But Tom, you had a couple of you thought it was closer to the kind of Iron Spider.
Yeah, it has sort of the same sort of wraparound legs. It doesn't have the same gold and red kind of aesthetic that the Iron Spider does in the comics.
And they have that like almost white or silver kind of piping or something.
But it's in that scene, very clearly meant to be this enticing,
looks like the game
beautiful,
a little bit, like with the big white stuff.
Yeah, I was thinking about, but they are very much like Insomniac's Spider-Man
Yeah.
game is not a tie-in to Homecoming.
Yeah.
It makes
Yeah.
me sad because I had a lot of really cool ideas about crossing over things, and they were
That
like,
was
no,
my first
they're
one I saw. I
different.
was like, wait a minute, is that? And then I looked, and it's not.
And
but-
finding out, and not even necessarily the suit that that Peter rejects at the end of the movie, but just his normal suit now. So many of the movie's best moments come from him not knowing how to work this suit.
Karen.
That's
at
Jennifer
all.
Connelly
And
voicing
yes,
it.
Karen
She was
Suit Lady.
Betty Ross in Incredible Hulk, so she's already in the
also
MCU.
married
no,
to Jarvis.
Paul Bettany
no,
in
but
Vision.
she's not.
in Hulk, not Incredible Hulk.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yes.
Yeah, in the non-MCU one. But yeah, the fact that Janet
correct.
and
I
Jarvis
stand-
are married
I'm sorry.
is a beautiful, beautiful thing. Janet
uh,
better be back. is all
Well,
I'm saying.
I did ask Kevin Feige, does
About
this
Janet?
mean? Well, no, I said, does the Spidey Sense not exist in the MCU? Because we haven't seen it yet, and how do you really need Spidey Sense when you have a suit that's telling you everything? I mean, if his Spidey Sense really worked, Ned wouldn't have found out that he was Spider-Man.
Right.
Aunt May would be right behind him, and he would have sensed that. So and we're going to talk about Aunt May in a minute. But yeah, Feige said that it does exist. It just maybe hasn't quite developed the way it has yet.
Yeah, well, there is a line in Civil War that sort of references the Spidey Sense a little bit, and it's they're talking about, I think Tony and Peter are talking about his goggles, and Peter says that those are meant to focus his senses
Yeah.
and kind of shut out some other stuff. So I think that I wouldn't be surprised if we
I
see the
love
Spidey
that
Sense
I think you
this-
play
really
more.
need it, though.
But also, I love that this movie, like, so many of the, we've seen all, like, the very graceful swinging through the city shots in everything from the games to the movies. And I love that in this, there's, like, Peter trying to swing through and just, like, hitting the ground. Or, like,
Yeah.
that one thing where he has to
Shoots the
run
web.
across the
Yeah.
field to,
He's
like,
this
be-
sucks. And
Yeah, just to run across it.
He,
yeah.
like, he's, like, crashing through people's houses. And I
the
almost...
Ferris Bueller nod was great.
yeah, like,
Yeah.
I think...
Because you're thinking Ferris Bueller,
Yeah,
you're watching that, and then they
like,
just
this
cut
is-
right
yeah,
to it.
it's right on a TV.
But I like that, like, we see that this is not a polished Spider-Man. So I
Yeah,
believe that, like, maybe one day he'll be able to focus and use those powers in a way that won't get him caught by the two closest people to him in his life in rapid succession.
Let's talk about a couple of things about the ending, and then I do want to kind of circle back to a couple of elements related to the high school sequences. First of all, real quick, Pepper Potts, does Tony actually really propose to her when he goes back in with the ring just to buy time? And two, were they going to out Peter Parker as Spider-Man?
No,
from
he
there?
just
He's
he
gonna show up in the
said he
suit?
said you're gonna wear the suit, walk out, and we're gonna announce you as the newest member of the
Yeah.
Avengers formally.
Yeah, so it's always clear that it's
Because
not
it's
gonna
so
be.
weird because secret identities mean nothing in the MCU.
Yeah,
so
because
it would be
well,
kinda
then you got to
strange.
get involved with labor laws because he's under 18. So like, they would want to keep him
Yeah,
a
a lot of
secret.
logistics.
And then what do we think of Aunt May apparently finding out that Peter is Spider-Man? Do you think they're going to somehow just say this is a joke, like he'll find a way to talk his way out
No.
of it?
No way.
No.
No way.
No, I think it's going to be why she lets him go and do Infinity War. I'm so excited about Infinity War. Sorry, I'm like finding an excuse to fit that into every comment. But I think it'll probably be a big part of Homecoming too. Like her now knowing and still wanting him to be responsible. He'll
She
be
gonna
what,
be the
16 now.
Yeah.
Like, you know, okay, well you can go do the Stark internship and make sure you're home by this time.
Yeah, and it goes back to what makes this movie so enjoyable, which is the fact that it is so different than any of this. It's not afraid to do things that the other Spider-Man movies didn't do.
Like
and
have a
that's
hot Aunt May.
Aunt Bay. Yeah. Hashtag Aunt Bay.
Speaking of other things that this movie did, in the moments we have left, I do want to talk about the high school element of this movie.
It's what made the movie special.
The personality of it, the fact that it is like it's like a John Hughes movie, but also very much like Freaks and Geeks. And John Francis
Superbad.
Daly, John Francis Daly is one of the writers, and he was the star of Freaks and Geeks. And we went to the premiere, and I cornered him at the after party, and I asked him, I said, you know, the first episode of Freaks and Geeks actually is kind of the same arc as Spider-Man, and it ends with the kid going to the dance with the girl. I know that's a trope of high school movies, but I just thought that it made it such a much more charming movie. You know,
You said it earlier, where like the stakes of him making it to an academic event is the same stakes as defeating a villain. And I think that's what makes it work, because every single moment where something big and serious was happened had a punch where it reminds you that we're just in high school. When the Shocker shows up and Peter and Ned are in the hallway, and then Peter runs away, and then
did Shocker get there? I mean, he was there in seriously 2 minutes.
Then the chess club is like, hey, Ned, what are you doing? I don't know. To me, that worked so well, and that was my hope going in. I still think that the trailers gave away way too much. I knew all the main beats of this movie going in, from the Staten Island ferry up through the airplane fight. But what wasn't in the trailer, but is so present in the movie, is this charm in high school, and that's what it needed. And to me, that's what makes this movie very special.
And one of the things that it does really, really smartly is it doesn't lean, as much as this movie is being sort of marketed as this is a John Hughes Spider-Man movie, it's great. It does not lean into classic high school archetypes of nerd, jock, basket case, that kind of thing.
Yeah. Even the way they did Flash was great.
Exactly. Flash is my example too, because Flash is this kind of awful kid that is, Penis Parker is obviously this huge refrain in the movie. But he is not only this kind of jerk character, but he's also part of the academic decathlon team.
Yeah.
And he
Wants
is...
his moment.
You can't just come back and be welcome. Welcome back, Peter.
So it was nice to see them kind of do a modern take on
that they go to a
school
science
movie.
school, and that even amongst eggheads, if you will, there are still divisions.
There will always
in
be
this
pecking
case,
order.
and it goes back to our earlier point about the haves and have-nots. I mean, Flash is a rich kid, Peter is not.
Right.
And so I think they would, again, just the wonderfully woven, interwoven kind of elements there in the movie. Let's talk about
MJ?
MJ. All right, Zendaya's Michelle. Call me MJ. Now, I spoke to Kevin Feige and Amy Pascal, and they said, and it was like a wiggle room answer. They're like, doesn't mean Mary Jane Watson isn't out there. This is just a nod to a character named MJ. This is just the nickname that she chose. Maybe he doesn't end up with her. Maybe there's a Mary Jane Watson. I think it was just a trial balloon to see how will people respond. But
and maybe we'll get a Batman Spider-Man crossover. It's Mary Jane. They're just gonna call her MJ.
I will say I like how they set that up. I hope that before she goes straight to necessarily being Peter Parker's love, she's part of the team.
Yeah.
And the next one, there were moments she was in it a lot less than I expected. Liz was so much more primary character than Michelle was. MJ, are we friends? I know. I'll consider me and MJ friends. But there were all those moments where you could tell she was putting the pieces together, and I would love to pick up in Homecoming 2, whatever the sequel will be called, with her being Peter, obviously you're Spider-Man, and her being a part of the crew and have it be her, Peter, and Ned as this great gang.
And how great
with
was
the
Ned,
computer
right?
guy.
Yeah, and what a hilarious inversion of kind of the Raimi Spider-Mans that would be, where they spend 2 movies building up to her finding out that Peter is Spider-Man. And how great would it be if in the next one he's like, I have a secret. You're Spider-Man, I know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then finally, let's talk about real quick the acknowledgement that Miles Morales exists within the MCU. Feige and Pascal again confirmed to me in a phone interview that they're not saying we're going to see him, but it's possible he exists in the MCU. So Aaron Davis, played by Donald Glover, ends up becoming Prowler in the comics. How stoked were you guys to kind of get that Miles Morales acknowledgement?
It just gives them another opportunity to do something with Spider-Man in these movies that we haven't seen before, because that was the big complaint about Amazing Spider-Man, is we've been over all this, we know everything about Peter's backstory, we don't need all of this. What an interesting way to seed the future with this possibility of maybe once Tom Holland walks away from this role, he's got Miles Morales waiting in the wings. And now, because we know that Aaron Davis mentions his nephew being in a neighborhood where Vulture is selling weapons, we're gonna get Miles at some point.
It is so interesting that we're so deep into the MCU now that they are setting up alternates for everything.
Yeah.
Like, oh, when Tom Holland leaves, Tom Holland's like 20. Like, I doubt he's going to outgrow this role anytime soon. But as you keep looking to expand, it makes me feel old that I remember like us all championing Donald Glover to be playing Miles Morales, and now he's playing his uncle. But I think that that's like a very fitting for the people. Obviously, that's seems to be why Donald was interested in the role, to potentially have some role in a spin-off movie or whatever story that may come out of it. But very fitting for us fans.
I just want to say real quick too, the Donald Glover scene that I like the most is the vocal interrogation thing.
Oh yes, yes.
It's a great kind of a jab at like, and you know, I'm a huge Batman fan, but like that kind of thing. But also too, the fact that if Peter doesn't change his voice, everyone finds out.
I do have a theory, possible idea as to the sort of Miles-Peter relationship, like where that's going from a practical standpoint. I wouldn't be surprised if we saw, and obviously the business side of this has to be worked out, but for Marvel and Sony to have their cake and eat it too, what if Miles ends up becoming like the MCU Spider-Man, and then Peter is Sony's Spider-Man? Like they can both have them at the same time.
Well, we're big fans of Spider-Man Homecoming. We want to hear what you thought of the movie. Let us know in the comments. For more Spider-Man coverage, check out our review of Spider-Man Homecoming and see Tom Holland take our Spider Gadgets quiz. And for all things movies, keep it here on IGN.